Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this much anticipated live stream with Rob Hutchinson from DearSA. We're going to talk about some recent public participation feedback, successes pertaining to public participation processes that have completed, as well as get some feedback from Rob about other things ongoing behind the scenes at DearSA, other campaigns that are very important and that require your feedback as active citizens, as well as some feedback and question and answers about the recently concluded Firearms Control Act Amendment Bill public participation campaign, what the past successes of public participation preventing bad legislation from becoming reality means for us. And Rob is due to join us shortly. He is spreading the word across the Telegram channels. I think he's just hooking up his, hang on, he's asking me for the link. We are so well organized. I already sent him the link. I'll send it to him again. And then he can, just join us on the screen. But how are you doing all? Vernon, David Boshoff, good to see you again, sir, as well as Richard Lemmer. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting discussion, as well as the fact that, there is some decent audience public participation happening. So while we wait for Rob to finally join us and get here, Mark, good to see yourself as well. It's been a busy time for public participation. We've had the PEPUDA Act. We presently have a very big one that I'll bring up about this hate crimes bill, which essentially has the potential to put you in prison for just being mean to someone online, not even, but here we go. The man of the moment is here, Rob. Good evening. Lekker. I was trying to fill the dead air a little bit, but it's great because everyone else is tuned in the meantime. Etienne, De Beer, Shoaib, Kermit. How are you, Rob? Firstly, most important, how are you doing?
I cannot complain. It's been a rough couple of weeks, but nothing I don't thoroughly enjoy. So,
I was about to say a busy couple of weeks from last I heard.
Exceptionally busy, but yes, absolutely wonderful. I think I thrive on that kind of pressure and getting things done. It's just great. Yeah, love it.
Well, that's the whole key. And ever since I became involved with you and DearSA, that's the one thing about the platform I've noticed, or about the organization. It is busy. It makes a beehive look lethargic in comparison. There's just stuff going on all the time. And maybe before we dive into the success stories, there's some really important campaigns on the DearSA platform right now that are very significant and hold potentially far-reaching consequences, unless we get that traction with regards to active citizens having their say on it. If you had to say, okay, top 3 at the moment that you recommend people go click on and get their voices heard, what would you say they are and why they're important?
Well, that's a tough question. I think they're all equally important. Because the strange thing about these bills is they're all intertwined in some way or another. They might present them as standalone bills, but they're definitely not. They all work together. When you make one amendment on this side, you have to adjust some bill or legislation on another side. But if I had to look at the most important things here, I'm looking at the website right now. I'd say the topmost, without a doubt, is the proposed hate speech and hate crimes bill. That piece of legislation has far-reaching consequences, and it's a definite takeaway of certain freedoms, without a doubt. And the problem with that bill, or the way I see it, is that you struggle to define what is actually hate speech. It's easy to define what is a hate crime because it involves a physical action and there's a direct and visible and tangible result from that. But when it comes to speech, it's a very gray area. And what the bill says, it's down to however you feel at the moment. If you feel offended, then you can lay a charge of hate speech against someone. And they've defined certain categories. And quite interestingly on that one, there's about 17 different categories, and I'd say the most interesting one is you cannot discriminate against someone based on their HIV status. So you can't mock someone or say something against them just based on their HIV status. So what we should see with that is perhaps a broadening of that definition to say not just HIV status, but medical status as well. And that will open up some fantastic possibilities.
We actually, I think we were a bit naughty on Twitter, and we said, if this thing passes, if you call someone an anti-vaxxer, you could end up in prison for it. So it's, I mean, that might be a bit of a reach, but not really. Once you read into the contents of that bill, you don't have to physically be harmed or actually be compromised or what's that wonderful legal term? Be prejudiced by what someone does. You must just feel emotionally distressed enough, and that if that criteria is satisfied alone, that means you are a victim of hate speech. And the other person can get both barrels, so to speak. Good evening, Maggie and Patricia, by the way. Good to see you both here. So that's an important one. The hate screams, not the hate screams, the hate crimes.
Well, they are screams, yes.
They are screams. So please go and comment on that one. Mark, well, good evening, Squire. Questions to save for later. How can we prevent what is happening in Australia with regards to lockdowns from happening here? That's a very good question.
Yeah.
And I need to put a pin in this one because this actually may tie into everything else we were discussing. So, sorry, so the hate crimes is the first one. Are there two others that pop out immediately? I just like doing things in threes.
Yeah, I think threes is always the way to go here with anything. On how that works in life, the golden ratio of threes, yes. Yeah, so there's a couple that have just gone by, but there are still some really interesting ones that are live. The one is and there's some confusion around this bill as well. It's the proposed license fee regulations. So the amendment to that and how they charge for license fees, that supposed 250 Rand, that is an additional amount on top of license fees. So the Department of Transport has put out a call for comment on those regulations, which is quite strange because normally they don't put out calls for comment, for public comment on regulations. The regulations are determined by the minister and at the sole discretion of the minister at that time. So it's great that they put these out for public comment because we can actually influence them in any way you want them to go right now. And what they've put there is there's a lot of media stories and other organizations talking about the addition of 250 Rand charge to book it online. But that's actually not the truth. What's actually happened here is this: the entire license booking and renewal system, both driver's license and car disc licenses, they're moving it to an online service, which is great.
Yeah,
I think it's a great move forward, and it's about time. It's about time, avoiding all these ridiculous queues and extra costs.
I was about to say we're about to enter the early 2000s. I mean, not quite the 21st century yet, but we're one step closer.
Well done, South African government, for stepping into and switching on your computers. This is how they work. So, yes. So I think it's actually a good move. I think it's a great piece of legislation and a good way forward to centralize everything. You can actually, the bill proposes that there'll be systems online where you can renew your driver's license, where you can renew your car disc license, and even have them deliver it to you at a charge. And the 250 Rand that the media is shouting about is actually a charge that already existed before. That was dependent on municipal regions. So some municipalities would charge up to 250 Rand to renew your license, your driver's license card. And some would charge less. I think some charge down to about 185 Rand. But it's generally that whole online service there. So there's not really an increase or an additional charge. There is a slight annual increase, which is to be expected, and that's about it. But I think it's a good move forward, to be dead honest. And people should actually read it properly and have a look at it and actually welcome that system, because it'll hopefully, if it works, of course, if it works, it'll save a lot of time and hassle for people taking days off of work trying to get their licenses renewed and so on. So yeah, that's hopefully people actually understand it.
That's a potential positive change.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's 2 out of 3 so far. A bit of
2
good
out
news.
of 3. I've got to pick another one.
Well, maybe one that has closed already, and that's kind of the foundation of this discussion. Minister Lindiwe Zulu, she withdrew that green paper on social security, that whole thing. What's the story there? And tell me if I'm getting this wrong, because the implication of that, should it have passed, would be that every single taxpayer would be, or not, sorry, taxpayer, every single income earner, regardless if you're paying income tax or not, would be obligated to put in an amount towards that. That would be up to 12% of your total income. So I can now imagine, if you're already paying up to 41% personal income tax, and you're shot with another 12% of this thing. It was a crazy suggestion, but that's now been withdrawn. Yes. So what happened?
Well, let's say it has been withdrawn. However, that doesn't mean it's gone away. It has been, looked at this way, just shelved. It's been shelved, and it will be reworked, and it will be reintroduced. There's no doubt about that. A green paper is simply an indication of how the government is thinking at that time. So they put that out to the public. It's not even how government is thinking, it's how the minister and the department is thinking at the time. And they put forward proposals, and then Parliament discusses it, or the public put forward suggestions. And then it moves on to a white paper. And then from the white paper goes to the committee. The committee drafts a bill, and that goes out for public comment and discussion, and then gets voted on in Parliament to eventually become an amendment to whatever piece of legislation is out there. But this green paper proposed, as you said, a 12% increase. However, it was up to 12%. So there was still a threshold. If you earn about 273,000 a year, then you pay a ceiling, or a maximum of 2,760 rand a month. Anything below that would have been between 8 and 12%, depending on which income bracket you were in and which social need or group that you did belong to.
So it's actually potentially a regressive tax then, because the less you earn, the higher proportion of your income you'd be forced to pay.
Exactly.
If I understand that correctly.
Yes, yeah. Well, you would still have to pay the minimum amount.
Exactly.
So if you earned above that amount, then you'd definitely be seeing an extra up to 3,000 rand a month expenditure. However, there was also another suggestion posed in that green paper, and that was the basic income grant. So the 2,750 rand was a contribution towards a mandatory pension scheme. And if you wanted to top it up through private means, you could do that through whatever private means you want to. So you could run 2 parallel pension funds or retirement schemes as you felt necessary. But the basic income grant was also an additional, I think they proposed, I stand corrected, up to about 10% of your gross salary on top of that. So that would go towards a universal basic income grant for everyone. They hadn't settled on a specific amount yet, but it was between 7,000 and 15,000 rand, which is a substantial amount. Yeah. So it would have proposed quite a massive increase to personal taxes across the board. And
exactly, in a society like ours, already overtaxed to the hilt, it would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, especially for the middle class, without a doubt. Yeah, the middle class would have struggled quite considerably to get that going through. But we're lucky due to public pressure that the minister actually withdrew it, and I think we sent through about 22,000 comments on that, which was absolutely wonderful.
I recall
22,000 in 2 weeks was great.
Yeah, that's the thing. So, and that's an amazing success story in the sense that I think the newspapers quoted that DearSA had the lion's share of the public comments came through the DearSA platform, 22,000, of which 99% of which were in rejection of that green paper, the proposal in its totality. I can't speak tonight, and what that proved to me again, and I mean, we've had numerous of these things, and I think we'll bring up the other success stories in due course tonight, is the fact that if people make their voices heard, and they do so through a legitimate platform or through a legitimate mechanism, they cannot be ignored. It puts politicians back into their hidey holes with their bad laws that they can then clutch and try to figure out what to do next. You had this, and I mean, this is now where the Firearms Control Amendment Bill, the proposals come in as well. That's gone dead quiet. I know you were busy with an executive summary of that campaign, but I mean, it was 151,000 submissions. That's a huge amount of data to summarize into something meaningful. I don't know how that's been going. You've been a busy man.
It is. For every campaign that we do produce a report as well. And that does require going through every single comment that comes through. But we've got quite used to it because we separate it into top concerns. So the top concerns are related to the memorandum of objects in the bill, so we can sort it out through the top concerns straight away. But it still requires reading through, in that case, 151,000 individual comments. But you start to spot a trend as you go through it, because a lot of people read other people's comments and then make similar comments. So you pick up a theme as you go, and then we pick the best comments and then supply government with a summary of that, and also post it on our website so people can get feedback, and for complete transparency, you can see what the outcome was. And we also supply government with a full Excel spreadsheet of every single comment, so then they know everything is legitimate. And that's the beauty of this. We send these comments through immediately. We don't wait until the end of the campaign to send them through. As soon as somebody clicks submit, the system generates an email in background, which is in the official format, and it sends it immediately to government. So in cases like the one we mentioned earlier on, the green paper, government, the closing date was actually on the 10th of December. And because they had received 22,000 objections within 2 weeks, they thought, this is crazy, we better stop this now. And they ended it straight away. But with the Firearm Amendment one, that's, as you say, has gone totally quiet. And I think because of the 151,000 that we sent through, and there were other organizations that did the same, they also sent through thousands, hundreds of thousands of comments in objection to that. And I can say in objection because, again, I'd say 99% of the submissions that we delivered were opposed to the bill in its entirety, which is heartwarming to see. Okay? People have realized the danger of disarming civil society, and government attempts to do that is absolutely crazy, especially in South Africa. And the majority of the comments reflected that concern. We've got a crime, dare I say, epidemic in South Africa, and an incredibly high murder rate, and coupled with a high unemployment rate, and it's absolutely crazy that government think that citizens are not capable of defending themselves, or that a firearm is not a valid reason self-defense is not a valid reason to own a firearm. And it's that one, it was an eye-opener for everyone, I think. From two points of view, it showed us that we can influence government. It showed government that they need to do public participation or face the backlash. and it showed the
Exactly.
public that they can actually make an impact in
Yes.
these bills.
And I think that's the powerful message. And I mean, I've said it a few times, and people are probably sick of hearing it, but apathy among citizens is a far greater threat to our democracy and our way of life and our individual freedom than a tyrannical government ever could be. And the only antidote for that apathy, I'm not going to say the only vaccine for that apathy, because I think vaccine analogies are tired by this stage of the game. But the only antidote for that apathy is to empower yourself to make your voice heard by seeing the results of you flexing that muscle, that citizen power muscle. And so that bill has also gone quiet. I mean, there's been no feedback. I don't believe the Police Portfolio Committee received any reports on it. In your opinion, where do you think it is, or what happened to it?
I think the timing was just ridiculous. So they've actually shelved that. And they did that about 2 years ago. As we know, they leaked it out to the public deliberately. I don't think it was leaked out accidentally. It was just to test the way that the firearm community would react to it. And I think the same will happen here again. Once the elections have died down, once this whole COVID thing has died down, the Firearm Amendment Bill will present itself in some way or form again. But be prepared. It'll be even a bigger response the next time.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, and people always keep asking, well, what do we do now? And I think you had a wonderful analogy the other day where you say that this type of amendment bill or these types of legislation, they're all the same animal. They're like a mole that ruins your lawn. And it's now popped back into its hole. We need to use this time to pave over it with concrete so that the little bastard can't come up again. And this is where individuals getting involved, like expose take the good news, the gospel of firearm ownership to people who don't own guns, expose them to it, speak to them, encourage them, support them, get more people trained, get more people involved in the hobby side of it. There's so much we can do. And as a matter of interest, this particular campaign, I think I'm only aware of 2 campaigns ever thus far where DearSA we're not a neutral party entirely. And it was this particular one and the GBV stuff, where DearSA was either in support of a motion or in opposition to it. Because for the rest of the thing, like it's a neutral party. But I mean, when it comes to these basics of bodily integrity and safety of the person, it does make sense to actually take a stand on some of the stuff. So well bloody done, Rob. It was a team effort. It was very much a team effort, but I'm glad you did most of the heavy lifting. I'm glad to just be here. There was also another interesting point about these amendments and participations, and it was there when we talked about the green paper that was withdrawn and it evaporated, but it'll come back to me at some point. But about all the other success stories, these 2 aren't the only successes. I mean, just to let everyone know, when the executive summary is ready, I will publish it on Piratus. I will do a video on it. I will dissect it. I will present it to anyone who cares. You will not miss out on it. I promise. Rob will make sure I get it out to you. But these DearSA success stories are actually success stories for everyone who participates in these things. There were a lot of bad legislation that was stopped in its tracks because people made their voices heard. The here's the thing I forgot. EWC, he made a comment the other day that there was this deceptive headline, I think it was on my broadband, where they said EWC is now being adopted by Parliament or which is not the case at all. What actually happened there?
Okay, so I think the headline was that Parliament adopts the Expropriation Bill.
Yes, that was the one.
Yeah, so that was kind of misleading, and I saw the comments coming off of that, which was raised concern there. The truth is that the parliamentary committee adopted the bill. And the committee consists of about 20 individuals or so from all different parties. They were commissioned in 2018 to produce a report on amending the constitution to cater for expropriation without compensation. And the committee's been through various changes because the parliament changed from the 5th to the 6th parliament and so on. But they eventually finished their report, formulated a draft, expropriation bill, the Constitution 18th Amendment Bill, and put that up for public comment quite some time ago. And then they reopened it for public comment after the ANC and the EFF came to loggerheads about whether state should be custodian of all land or whether it should be title deed should be issued. So that's put it up for comment again. And we ran that whole campaign, sent through quite a few, I can't even remember how many it was, but it was a couple of thousand again. But the committee then looked at all of that. They discussed the contents of the paper, and then they voted to adopt the bill, the Constitution 18th Amendment Bill, which means it's going to go into Parliament to be. Then Parliament will then vote if it should be taken further, and amendments should actually be carried forward on to the Constitution. So it has not been adopted yet. They simply voted and adopted or decided to present it, adopted it as it is, and so it can be presented to Parliament. So the headline created a bit of confusion there. Oh no, it's expropriation's gone ahead. It's game over now. No, it hasn't. It's actually only just begun now. So now the actual parliamentary process starts.
And I mean, there were indications. I can't remember which ANC big head said something about, that the ruling party might have to abandon EWC, or they should abandon it because it's the reason why, because it's that unpopular. I mean, that was the biggest campaign I think DearSA ever had. How many individual submissions came through that? It was hundreds of thousands of them.
Oh, hundreds of thousands. So it's been the first one we ran was one of the first campaigns we ran. It was in about June 2018. And on that bill alone, that was just the inquiry as to whether the Constitution was a hindrance in its current form. And there we sent through about 239,000 individual submissions to Parliament. we actually printed them out individually as well. 239,000 pieces of paper. and delivered them to Parliament. It was about 2 tons of paper that we delivered.
I was about to say, that must have been massive.
Yeah, it was like 75 boxes of paper, and it was quite a spectacle. But it was great to see such public input on that. There's 239,000, and then we ran several campaigns after that. There was the Expropriation Bill in its first draft form. There was the Land Courts Bill, the Constitution 18th Amendment Bill, and then there was the Expropriation Bill again for a second time. And I think in total, we probably just on those related campaigns sent through about 600,000 individual submissions through to Parliament on expropriation. So we're keeping a good track record on that and keeping on top of everything, especially when it comes to EWC. We know the ins and outs of that. So I think it'll be a long time still that campaign will be going.
And this is the thing, if it weren't for people actually taking ownership of that debate and of that discussion and getting in there with their submissions, we would have had EWC like railroaded through Parliament long ago. I mean, the ruling party didn't hold back for any rational reason. I mean, we know for a fact that the ANC is not afraid of divestment or disinvestment. They're not afraid of foreign investors taking their money and running. They've got more than enough free money coming in from China and elsewhere, to line their pockets. Because bear in mind, they don't care if, like most African liberation movements turned into despotic governments, they really care about lining their own pockets. They're getting on in years as well. I mean, the average ANC MP is close to retirement age. They just want to scoop enough millions and the country can go to the pit toilets, to be honest. And I think that's something that people don't understand. So if it weren't for your voices, guys and girls, if you didn't participate, this thing would have been a disaster already. So well done. And Jean-Martin Clark asks a question. Well, Richard Lemmer says the same thing, as well as Schwabe. So with regards to license the person, there's a lot of organizations that are suddenly getting on board with this idea. So I never owned it. I never owned it to start off with. I was just one of the guys that was running with it, and I'm glad to see it's taking off. So we might have SADA on board. We're trying to get the DA who appear, well, I don't dislike them. I just don't trust any political party. But if they're willing to champion it, then good. I'm happy for them to champion the idea. The Institute of Race Relations, AfriForum, a whole bunch of people on board with this. So let's see where it goes. And I believe that we'll also be running a whole bunch of mini campaigns tying into this Firearms Control Act Amendment Bill in the near future as well. Smaller ones that are more focused, but that are also going to be important. Anything you can tell us about that, Rob, or is it still a bit under the covers?
No, well, there's always something under the covers. We don't want to give away too much, but it's when you get such an amazing public response, 151,000 people who raise concerns about a piece of legislation that is still in draft format, it hasn't even been put forward yet or become law, then you kind of have to do something about it as an organization. You can't remain sit on the fence forever, especially when you hold such solid evidence of public sentiment, and within that there are amazingly good reasons put forward by the public, which government needs to be aware of. So if 99% of those 151,000 say no ways, we reject this bill in its entirety, then we are obliged to take that action further. And like I say, the mini campaigns that will spring off of that will be in a proactive fashion to try and amend the Firearm Control Act to be more suitable and accommodating to both current firearm owners and potential new people, with the whole licensing process and so on. And your suggestion and proposal of license the person register the firearm is absolutely fantastic, and it's vitally important that does present itself within an amendment to the Firearms Control Act, which we will definitely pursue on behalf of the public. And that will change the face of firearm ownership in South Africa.
Very much so.
It'll make it much more in the government's favor. It'll make it easier for them to manage. It takes away a lot of administration and burden on society and police stations and everything, the whole system. I mean, we've seen failures with the permitting system. It's an absolute chaos.
Big time. We've seen awful things going on there. Fraudulent licenses being issued to people who are known criminals and gangsters, all sorts of awful things. And just to put to Steve, it does. We also have a campaign for that. Well, South African Arms and Ammunition Dealers Association and CHASA do. It's on the DearSA page. If you have a license or a competency certificate that has been outstanding for more than 90 days, go put your details in there, join the action, because there is a class action suit coming, thanks to SADA, who are willing to subsidize it to a huge degree. The communication will go out on that shortly, but we need people to submit their details. So yes, exactly. We are very busy with these things. Joe actually has a question for you, Rob. He says, you predicted on this show that EWC will happen by the end of the year or next year. Do you still feel that way?
Put me on the spot there. Yes, I did make that prediction. Given the elections and the outcome of the elections, and now the elections are actually happening on the 27th of October, 27th to what's the 1st? I think yes. I'm going to stick to my prediction and say yes. There's going to be a major change in the landscape after the elections. We don't know which way it's going to go, but whichever way it goes is going to be either a fight back from whichever party loses or has lost power, or a stamp in authority by some other party that has one. If it's not currently the ANC, they're going to have to assert their power. And then you've got to look at the broader game here as well, and that's the introduction of these. Yes, you do ask tough questions, don't you? And then you look at the broader picture here with COVID and the vaccine passports and the introduction of all these closely monitoring systems and healthcare and NHI and everything else like that. All of that, or should I say none of that, can operate without expropriation, without compensation. None of that. So to introduce their bigger plan, they're going to have to start with the process. It might not be land at this stage. It might not be the first thing to go, but it will be intellectual property rights and businesses and so on. Stuff the government needs but can't afford.
And this is the thing that people so misunderstand about this, is that the EWC issue is perpetually mischaracterized as being a land issue, which it most certainly isn't. Especially if you, and I mean, this kind of ties in a little bit to Mark's question earlier, which, thank you for the super chat again, sir. And we're probably going to get to this organically. But the issue with this is, we are living in a state of shortages, and the more people become self-reliant away from government, you go off grid. So you stop paying ESCOM. You don't pay your TV license because you don't have a TV. You link up to Tesla's Starlink or to Elon Musk's Starlink, so you're not paying a South African service provider. You start taking yourself, your family off the grid. You're not reliant on government infrastructure anymore. Government is not interested in shrinking. It's not interested in less patronage. It's not interested in stealing less. It needs to come after your pensions. It needs to come after your savings. It needs to come after your businesses. It needs to come after your resources. You might see the nationalization of so-called key industries, a la National Party again, where if it's a strategic industry, it's just nationalized, whether it's petroleum or gas or steel or whatever they feel like nationalizing. This is not about sensibility. This is about keeping everything centralized, or the power centralized, the economic power centralized in their laps.
It is. That is without a doubt. And we don't have to go to the extremes of going off grid and everything else you mentioned. The first step is actually realizing that you don't really need government to solve the majority of your problems. It's become all too commonplace. We're upset with our neighbors, so we run to the authorities. We see a problem in our local community, we run to government to sort it out. We complain to government the whole time about problems that we could actually solve ourselves, either individually or by working together as a community. So we need to change our mindsets and remember that we actually have the capabilities to solve our problems, especially from a local level. And by doing that, you immediately become less reliant on government. You look towards yourself and your local community, your neighbors, or whatever else, to solve the problems, to build the businesses, to build local economies. And you certainly don't need government interference to do that. In fact, asking the government to solve those minor problems is a dangerous avenue, because government can't add anything. They can only take away. And they can do that by limiting other people so that other people can benefit. But if the community works together on their own, everyone benefits and everyone grows. So I think that would be the first step, is to become less reliant on government solving problems, and then look at other issues like going off grid and so on, which are costly whereas the other thing doesn't really cost you anything. It's
Exactly.
just a first step to changing your mindset and then taking a physical approach and step away from that. If we don't do that, then we're just paving the way for serfdom. We'll just be servants of a government instead of the government being our servants, which is the way it should be.
Exactly. And I think 2010 GWF, if I'm mispronouncing what your handle is, please correct me. I love this summary. Government needs codependence to function. They want people to be vulnerable and needy. And I love that connection with the disorder of codependency, where you almost have the sycophantic necessity to please, yet at the same time be dependent on an authority figure. And that figures in hugely to Mark's question. By the way, Joe, thank you so much for your super chat as well. I appreciate the kind words. I wore the Suck My Glock shirt to work several times now. I'll send you a picture when I do it again this Friday. The customers love it. What we're seeing in Australia is a slowly escalating, ramping up from what I'm seeing in response to tyranny, while at the same time the tyranny is ramping up as well. It has to reach some sort of cathartic moment where everything comes apart at the seams into some sort of resolution. It's the same thing happening in Canada. It's the same thing still going on in France. Rob, what are we going to do? Because I come to the conclusion that the overwhelming majority of South Africans don't want this nonsense. It's a small vocal group of people with access to data and social media accounts and sycophantic journalists that screen cap their tweets that want this.
Yeah. But the question is, why do they want it? And I think if you could answer the why, then there's a greater understanding as to how we can prevent it. So there's many theories as to why they want it. And it's a definite crash of the economy. And it goes back into what you were saying earlier on there. As soon as you become dependent on government, you become obedient. And a dependent nation is an obedient nation, and a dependent citizen is an obedient citizen. You'll keep going to work, you'll keep paying your taxes, you'll do whatever the government wants you to do. And we're seeing the introduction of a social credit system now, which is going to monitor your status as an obedient citizen. And if you're not an obedient citizen, you'll lose social credit points and not be able to travel. Your mobility will be restricted. You won't be able to purchase certain items or enter certain venues. And it's a dangerous place, because where do you draw the line, and who is drawing that line, first of all? And if it's your
and what makes them suitable for drawing that line in the first 100%.
Place? It's totally up to their discretion, and when they make the decisions, it's pretty much the end of democracy, because you no longer have a system of governance by the people for the people. It's now a system of governance by an authoritarian figure that thinks it knows what is best for you. That's a dictatorship straight away. Yeah. So I do believe we are heading that.
It's the very definition of dictatorship, actually.
Yeah. And
where you are dictated to.
You dictated to exactly every aspect of your life. You're not allowed to look that way. You're not allowed to say these things. You're not allowed to act out in that way. You're not allowed to do anything without approval. And you can actually see it in some legislation that's being put forward now. It's no longer legislation that deems or caters to something that has happened. Oh, you've now broken a law. These are the consequences. The speed limit was 60 km. Now you were doing 80. Then now you have a fine. It's now changed to preventative measures to stop you from breaking that law, which is very
dangerous. Laws are never designed to do never should be designed to do in the first place. A law is always, as far as I've been educated in it, a law exists to prescribe punishment for a crime, not to prevent a crime through some sort of inception type intervention.
You're right. And once you cross that line, then you open the floodgates for anything. Next, it's going to be thought crime. and somebody said you were talking about this, or we think you were talking about this, or it looks like you were going to do something, therefore we're going to incarcerate you just in case you do that. And
Well,
it sounds
that's what
science fiction, but it's going to happen that way.
that hate crimes bill is a precursor, because it in essence infers thought crime. Not quite yet. It doesn't go entirely that far. It sows the seed by saying if someone feels emotionally so distressed by something you said or did or displayed, that you can then be held to account for that, regardless of real harm. So it removes the onus of harm actually being proved. It must just be it becomes an almost amorphous blob concept. The next step from that is, cool, we think you were thinking something bad. And what better way of supporting that accusation against you than having a social credit system where you have a couple of black marks against your name? So there you go. Probability dictates you probably were. It's absolutely frightening.
It is.
And
it is. If people think that there's, if you've got nothing to hide, or if you're a good citizen, then what's wrong with it? That's not the point. That's not the point at all, because those goalposts keep moving. They're not even cast in any solid structure or in any boundary. It's whatever the government feels at that time, or the governing body feels at that time. And that's a dangerous place to be as well. It can be used for political agendas, putting away dissidents, or anything like that. And you don't really need to look very far to see something like this already in action. Look at China. It's there already. The laws there and the way the government operates, it might seem like a free economy, but it certainly isn't. You can't say anything against the government. You can't say, you can't even mock the president. They've banned Twitter, they've banned Google, they've banned YouTube, and they put in their own things there. Is everyone happy? Well, we don't know, because they're too scared to say they're not happy.
Well, so you dare not admit it. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the same in, like, Australia is implementing something similar at the moment, and it's the thing that people don't understand about it is this: government, for example, their hatred for Bitcoin is not entirely irrational. Bitcoin would be a direct competitor if it becomes adopted as a medium of exchange for fiat currency. Fiat currency is worthless paper. It only has value because it's legally mandated as tender. The government tells you will use this to pay for goods and services. The money printer can be switched on at the government's behest. So they can close that loop. You will own nothing because they'll expropriate it. You will work for whatever they feel like paying you. And if you're not a good citizen with a bad score, they can deprive you of their welfare, which means that you will become, firstly, ostracized, you will starve, and you'll be denied. This discussion about denying people who are unvaccinated healthcare has further frightening implications, where we're crossing that boundary where previously no one will be denied healthcare based on their personal choices. We're now normalizing the idea of denying people basic, rights. Whether or not they want to pay for it is irrelevant. You will just be denied it because it's now a morality issue. How do you fight this, Rob? Apart from talking about it, discussing it, making people aware of the dangers of this authoritarianism, there has to be a way of pushing back. One is making government irrelevant through your actions. But there are other things we can do as well.
Yes, there are. So I think the most obvious one there, like we said, there is making the government irrelevant, getting them to return back to being servants of the people rather than leaders. And I think that's a mindset change that has to happen within us before it happens within government. We've got to remind ourselves that they're not leaders. They never were leaders. We elected them as representatives of us. And we've got to remind ourselves that they are there as representatives, but more importantly, as servants of us, to represent the way we want things to go, either as a country or as a community or as individuals. So first thing to do is remind yourself that we have the control. In a democracy, the people have the power, but you do that through changing that mindset and saying you are servants and you will do what we say. And you don't just do that through the election process, because that in itself is submitting to the ways of them once every 5 years isn't really going to make any difference, because you'll see all the campaigns that are coming out now. It's all based on political promises, which are based on hope and promise. And the time for hope and promise is over. We want to see elect people based on their track record. We want to see you are willing to do this. You have done this. You have made this change. You are capable, and you are worthy of receiving my support and being my representative. We can't believe promises anymore. It's because we've been lied to nonstop. Yet we still vote for the same liars and dare I say bullshitters out there. But
only 21 days to flatten the curve. No PPE scandals. All the COVID money, relief fund money, got to where it was supposed to be. SA is fine. Nothing to see here. Eskom is a paragon of success. How many other lies can we point out? Like, we'll be here all night if we had to start.
Absolutely. And they continue to lie because they get away with it, because we allow them to get away with it. There's no accountability and internal structures. You can't allow them or expect them to police themselves. It's not going to happen. So we need to do that in step. What you need to understand also is that people, they say power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. That's not always the case. What's more likely is positions of power attract the corrupt.
Yep.
And we can just look at any government and you can see that. And you got to understand that these people are not who they pretend to be. Not at all. And I can say that with confidence because I've been behind the scenes in being involved in politics. And the majority of people in there are in there for self-serving reasons. And they might tell you they're not, but they are. Doesn't matter who they are, what color T-shirt they wear. That is what they are there for. They're self-serving, and they'll do anything to protect those positions of power, especially if you have career politicians who've been there for most of their lives. They can't do anything else. They're stuck there. Therefore, they have to protect their political positions and comfy salaries and pension funds and so on and so on. And they will fight to do that, whether it involves lying to the public or making promises they know they can never fulfill. It will happen. So first of all, stop believing the bullshit. Yep. Whatever comes out of a politician's mouth generally is bullshit and self-serving. There are a few exceptions. I'll guarantee you that. But as human nature goes, it's never the nice guy that wins, is it? It's always the guy who doesn't mind trampling on others to get to the top, and it's nowhere more evident and displayed than in politics. So it's a dirty game. It's a very dirty game, and the only way we can protect ourselves from that is first of all realize that it's a dirty game, and do your own research, dig deeper, don't take anything for face value in any way whatsoever. And then again, become more community focused and less reliant on government. Totally. Cut them out of the equation completely. And then build up. I'd love to see sub or parallel economies forming and using cryptocurrency to trade locally and so on. Cut government out completely.
Exactly.
In South Africa, we're in a very unfortunate position where we have a handful of taxpayers supporting the majority of the country, and that's just a recipe for disaster. Oh yes, Rob Branch, get the masks off kids. That is absolutely essential. That is essential. I agree with that. Government loves nothing more than, I've said it several times here, than a subservient population. And things like mask mandates on kids is nothing more than a propaganda tool, in my view. Kids don't need it. There's other diseases developing from it. There's psychological issues that are coming from that. Get rid of it all. There's a great thing called civil disobedience, and we need to become more civilly disobedient and less obedient towards our so-called leaders. And remember, again, they're not leaders. We are actually the leaders that lead them. So civil disobedience is rejection of authority, and especially if that authority is self-serving, you have a right to reject that authority in any way you can. And I know I'm not saying civil disobedience like riots and looting and crap like that, because that just doesn't work. That makes government impose more measures to curb your behavior. It's simple things like not listening to governments, not wearing your masks, doing what you feel is right, and then
peaceful resistance, a la Gandhi.
Peaceful resistance, without a doubt, peaceful resistance. But the problem we're facing here is, and you fight.
And I think you're answering Daniel's question exactly here, because sorry, you can't fight this in the courts, guys. This is not a fight for litigation. Sorry, Rob, I interrupted you there.
No, but that's a very good point. You can't fight in the courts. Some things you can start the fight, but you're going to need it. No war is won fighting your enemy face on. You've got to flank and do the sides and little battles and everything else. So it's a multi-pronged approach to anything. And one of those approaches is the courts, because you've got to use the system to fight the system, without a doubt. But do the groundswell as well, and educate the people around you, convince the people around you that this isn't a benevolent government. There is ulterior self-serving motive here, and it doesn't include you. You're not part of that elite club. You're there to serve it and fuel it, and the only way you can serve it and fuel it is through force, and that force will be applied by the government. And it's subtle. It's a subtle change that is happening. The government is becoming more and more authoritarian, and simply because we allow them to, because we don't know any better. So I think knowledge is the greatest tool of power, but you need to do something with that knowledge and put it to good use. So you can either educate yourself as to what's going on, and there's no better way to educate yourself than to look throughout history, because history has a way of repeating itself, and it always does. So look at previous regimes, what's happened there in the past, and recognize the signs that are happening here. And it's a global thing, unfortunately. But we got what we must always remind ourselves, that there's close on 8 billion people on this planet. There's how many countries with how many rulers. There's no reason that we can't connect through networks and coordinate and do whatever we need to do to gain knowledge, to understand what's going on elsewhere, and provide support to those communities and individuals that do need it. We've got to take a stand. Yep. There's serious problems coming. There really is. I had a meeting just before this with an amazing bunch of people, and we got some serious big plans happening here, because we've realized that there's something, the signs are there for those who want to see them, and it's a dangerous future we have ahead of us.
Yep. And the thing is, it's up to us to determine how that future plays out. We cannot continue to sit on our hands and hope some elected official steers our vessel out of these waters. It's not going to happen. They told us in 2 weeks' time we would have gotten back to normal. They told us a lot of things along those lines. Okay, now just to get through this wave, just until the hospitals are prepared, just until we have more capacity for this, just until we know what's going on, just until the vaccine is out, just until the vulnerable are vaccinated, just until the elderly are vaccinated, just until everyone's vaccinated, then maybe you'll get some of your freedoms back. That sliding scale of, we took everything from you, and we're now kind of trying to figure out how much we feel like giving back to you. That's utterly fascist, and we've accepted that. We've almost normalized that level of abuse, and Mark is probably not far off the mark here. Bear in mind, we have local government elections coming up. A ward councillor earns around 40,000 Rand a month for doing what they do. If you have a shitty ward councillor that doesn't play ball, or that's obnoxious or arrogant, or refuses to engage with your legitimate concerns, or only will toe his party line before being a member of your direct community, then that's a ward councillor that needs to get booted very hard and fast out of that ward. You need somebody in there who cares about you and the neighborhood, and who's willing to shoulder that responsibility, and who isn't absent for 5 years and just starts doing stuff suddenly before a municipal election. That's just my thing. And again, you need to hold these people accountable, which is another thing that we haven't been doing. So these are discussions we need to have. Voter absenteeism doesn't work, but at the same time, go and vote, but don't expect it to change something, because the change starts with us. We got to carry that flag.
Wise words.
So on that note, as we've reached an hour, I think someone asked earlier, do you have any election predictions? Not that election predictions are what's going to get us out of this mess. And I think we need to do a lot more of these talks, Rob, if you're available, because the audience seems to. By the way, here's a question to you guys in the comment section. Do you want myself and Rob to do this more often? Just tell us in the comments how often. But Rob, sorry. What are your thoughts on these election predictions?
Elections. I don't think anything will change much. I think to be brutally honest, I think the DA is going to see a major decline, just because they seem to be all over the place. They're not focused. They're not thinking. Their strategies is very scattered. They've got a premier in the Western Cape who's saying absolutely ridiculous things, and they don't seem to be listening to the community. They really don't. And this is the time now when all parties should be listening to communities and listening to individuals. And although it is a municipal election and should be based on service delivery, the general voter population is going to treat this as a national election.
Yeah,
they want to see change. They're desperate for change, and it's going to happen. I think we're going to see a few surprises. I think the Freedom Front Plus is proving to be a viable opposition to the ANC, because they seem to be way more vocal and proactive in their approach than the other parties are. And they're challenging the narrative, which is a lot of the parties are not doing. They seem to be towing, as Kimo says, the NWO global agenda, and that's a fact. They definitely are. But
thanks, Rob Branch, for the compliment, by the way, for everyone's compliments, by the way.
Nice, thank you. Bedtime stories, yeah. But yeah, I think the Freedom Front are going to shine, as they did in the previous elections. They grew by 400% in the previous national election, and I think we're going to see the same thing happening here from a local level. And the great thing about local and municipal elections is it's community based. So the party that understands their community at a grassroots level is going to gain a lot of ground there. Interpret their national message into a language or phrasing or related to local issues, and you guarantee to win something there. And again, the parties that base their election campaigning on hope and promise, you don't stand a chance. Base it on measurable results, and you'll connect with your community a hell of a lot more. I think the EFF, I think they'll see a loss. They generally don't do well in municipal elections. We've seen that in the by-elections. They've lost quite a bit there. And the DA also, funny enough, I think people are are tired of that. The ANC, no, I think they're going to hurt, Sam. They're really going to hurt.
I mean, Ipsos is predicting this huge surge in the EFF, but I mean, Ipsos has gotten far more polling predictions wrong, and badly so than right. So Ipsos is almost a contraindicator. If they predict someone's going to do well, but this is exactly it. I mean, I like a lot of the people in the DA. It's a party that has some very good, promising, strong individuals in it.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
But overall, what you've said about directionless, that's a legitimate hardcore concern. And as someone living in the Western Cape, Alan Winde is a humongous problem for me. I cannot have the premier of my province sort of pontificate to me the way he is. Like the guy is an issue, and that's unfortunately what's costing them. I mean, screw it. I'm probably going to vote Freedom Front Plus specifically because I see them as. I mean, their marketing sucks. It sucks so bad. They need so much help with it. But as people that have stuck to their guns for decades, that are reliable in what they promise, and where they are given an opportunity to deliver, they do appear to deliver. I'm willing to give them a shot because what the DA needs in the Western Cape is a legitimate opposition, a real threat to their governance here, not the boogeyman. Oh, the ANC might come back. I mean, that might frighten a few naive people clinging to their Dom Perignon in Constantia, but it's not a viable threat that the ANC will ever have a legitimate foothold here ever again. But what they should have is a real opposition to put them to terms a little bit, and that's me. But yeah, so
I agree. I think competition's always good. Competition makes you up your game. It makes you improve and try and beat the threat of losing the majority, and that's what we need to see more in politics and also in civil society. Is we should welcome other groups in competition and up your game. But the thing is with this type of personality that gets into politics is as soon as they see a threat or a challenge to their authority or a competition in such, they seek to destroy that competition rather than better their own game. And that's also, it's a surefire way to destroy yourself long term. So yeah, I think hopefully the DA will lose a bit of power in the Western Cape, and it'll prompt them to up the game and improve everything. So hopefully that they regain the next time around. Yeah, and hopefully we see that across the country as well, where the ANC themselves also start losing a few municipalities, a few more, inviting competition in, and so on. And then hopefully that'll benefit society as a whole. But there again, it's up to the society and us as individuals to make sure that does happen. We can't sit back and let them take the lead. We need to guide them on a daily basis, if possible. But minimum, get involved and do something. Yeah.
Exactly. And Mark's point is correct. The Freedom Front does not quite have this humongous, huge sort of corporate pool of money that the DA has. So
but you don't need it. You don't need it.
Yeah, they don't need it. He points out the growth is organic, and that's, I think, where the strength lies. And that was a big lesson from the previous general election, is if you piss off the voting base enough, I mean, I'm so glad AVS brought this up, because that's exactly what happened in Schweizer Reneke with the DA's bad take on that. Oof, that was ballroom dancing through an entire music hall's worth of bear traps and collecting them all to the tune of I don't know, Lily Marlene or whatever.
Yeah, it was. But that's always been the DA's problem, is they sit on the fence, and the time for parties that sit on the fence is well and truly over.
Yep.
We need parties that are not afraid to step forward, to challenge head on, and say things that they were previously too afraid of. And I can understand why the DA was like that. They just suddenly gained a lot in a couple of elections ago, and become the official opposition, and you're too scared to say something that's going to offend your voter base, and especially if your voter base is quite diverse, you've got to be careful. But those times are over. The parties need to be more like the EFF, if I dare say so, and take a hard stance against things that they don't believe in or things that are going wrong. The EFF are excellent politicians. They can really play their constituents, and they play other parties incredibly well. I don't like their policies, but nonetheless, you give credit where credit's due. They're damn good politicians. So from that, the DA aren't such great politicians at all. They're too soft, don't take that firm stance. But the Freedom Front Plus, they do seem to have that. What I do like about the Freedom Front is that they have a more of a community-focused approach, where they're more like civil activists. They're very approachable. I think that's because that's their history, is where they came from, is about that. So they're in touch with their communities, they understand them, and know what to put forward. And that's a good sign. There should be more parties like that are more open to suggestion from their voter base, rather than telling their voter base what to do. Yeah, that's the positive move forward.
That's it. And again, it starts with us flexing our citizen muscles. Rob, so far feedback overwhelming. Everyone wants you back. We'll discuss offline if we want to make this a monthly thing or a fortnightly thing. Everyone must just understand one thing. Rob is an intensely busy man. As someone that tries to put shoulder to the wheel in DearSA, I seldom get the opportunity to do that, because every time I try to find the wheel to put my shoulder to, Rob's moved the cart another 10 blocks ahead of my present position. I have to run to catch up. So the man really is the heart and soul of DearSA. It's an organization that he started. I think your words were it started as a smaller like fishing trawler, and it's now turned into an oil tanker / aircraft carrier, and the captain has to maybe step back from the helm a bit and walk the bridge to check that everyone else is doing their jobs. But massive success. The future for this type of thing is wide open. And thank you for taking the time to chat to me and everyone else. And I think let's do this more. Often. And I think Mark puts it, Rob's phone never stops ringing. Yeah, some of those calls are fine.
It literally doesn't.
Yeah, here comes the question I've been dreading all night.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I've been avoiding fancy production for over a year, and I've been getting flack for it ever since the start. And okay, I have a couple of artists I'd like to approach to do something proper, like intro music. So if anyone has anyone they can recommend who, I mean, I'm not going to pay an exposure. I'll actually pay in real money, which I'm a little bit short of at the moment, but I'll make a plan. If anyone knows someone who can make me a cool tune and a cool intro, let me know. Otherwise, I might have to speak to Joe, because he seems to know all the people. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, Rob. Yeah, so we'll have a far more. I'll speak to Matak. A far more professional show going forward. But thank you everyone for tuning in. Rob, thank you for your time. We're well over time at this stage. So any last words from you?
I think I've said quite a bit, but I just have to reiterate and reinforce that it's all up to you, and you have to make the change. And like Gideon says, the change does begin with you and with us, and we have to convince ourselves that we don't have leaders. We never did have leaders. We just allowed certain people to lead us because we were not involved. Let's not let that happen. We've got to be more involved and guide them to do what we want them to do at the end of the day. That's it.
That's it, Rob. Thank you. And for all of you, if you want to get in touch with me, if you've got questions, comments, queries, there's my email address, gideon@sergiusguns.co.za. I'm back tomorrow night with Temba, Hofu, and Floyd, which is Thursday nights with TKF, I think is what it's called, something like that. And we'll be talking about arming women, empowering women to become their own first responders, feedback on Temba's Range Day on Saturday. And I still have some spots open on my 2-day training course co-hosting with Arno Balder of Combative Concepts in Gauteng next weekend. So if you're interested, drop me a message and I'll send you the details. Everyone, thank you so much for your time tonight. Rob, thank you. Stay safe. See you tomorrow night. Rob, see you soon. And have a wonderful rest of the evening. Take care and bye-bye.